the pandemic, and I don't know how all districts were, but ours was actually pretty supportive of us during the pandemic. And we were able to do like two half day classes with really small classes when we did come back into the building. And it was like, just like, I think it was like 2.5 hours, if I'm remembering correctly, each session. And then we had Wednesday for planning. So it's kind of like, okay, this is how it should always be. You should always have a day that you get to sit here and plan and get everything ready, because I think we realized how much we'd been doing on our own time before that,
Right.
and maybe we had realized it, but just didn't understand how it was affecting us. And I think we were able to like have more of an actual life.
I wish I knew how much I miss not knowing that we're all screwed.
A few years ago, I started writing a fictitious story based on my time as an educator. It is called Taught, and the story was partially inspired out of anger and frustration fueled by burnout. Okay, actually, it was more than partially inspired by anger and frustration. But Taught has also become a vehicle for me to tell what I thought at the time, and in some ways continue to think, was and is the real story of teaching. I now realize that my perspective is not everyone's perspective, but there are some pieces of Taught that resonated with many educators. This podcast is an extension of that story, and I, a former teacher, will interview other educators asking them to share how they really feel about the current state of education. Why are so many teachers burn out? Why are so many, like me, leaving the field? We likely won't solve any problems or come up with any solutions, but we can create a community of voices that maybe begin the conversation around how educators can take back teaching. I'm Melissa LaFleur. Welcome to Taught, the podcast. On today's episode, I am talking to my former colleague and current friend, Shana. Towards the end of our time together, Shana and I talk about losing colleagues. And I'm not talking about two other career opportunities. I'm talking about the biggest loss, death. This was the elephant in the podcast because Shana unexpectedly lost her teaching partner this year. We were both emotional during portions of our time together, and that may come out a few times in the podcast. However, her conversation and time with me is a testament to her strength and devotion to her career as an educator. She did not want to focus on this portion of her journey. She wanted to focus on being positive about her classroom, students, and families, all while she is clearly still grieving the loss of someone who was so precious to her. Out of respect for her process and her teaching partner, we may seem to gloss over this in the episode. However, it was important to both of us to not publicize something very private while simultaneously honoring this person and presenting the message that educators are in survival mode in some very literal ways. Having said all of that, in today's show notes, I am including resources for counseling services. Shana and I are not the only ones experiencing loss and grief. If you or someone you care about is in need of grief counseling or a safe space to talk about your burnout, please look at the resources on my website at taught.buzzsprout.com in the show notes for today's episode. And please share this podcast. There are so many of us out here, and we need each other right now. Today I have my friend Shana on the podcast, and Shana teaches first grade at the last elementary school that I worked at. And she does this while simultaneously being a wonder mom to her 6-year-old and a new puppy mom. That one got me, Shana, because I have to tell you, I'm not even working right now, and I don't know that I could do a puppy, but I've seen the pictures and adorable. So thanks for doing this and welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what you do right now, work-wise.
Well, as you said, I teach first grade. I have 19 kiddos right now. All different academic levels. I have an ILS student, which used to be called self-contained student. I think it's intensive learning systems now. I can never remember all the acronyms because they always are changing. I have many behavior issues in my class. Um, I have several paras that are in my class in and out throughout the day, and just trying to teach them all that I can.
So, just to back up for a second, ILS, this is because of.
It used to be called self contained. It was where
Mhm.
they were not able to have a least restrictive environment in any other classroom. And a lot of them do have behavior issues because some of the students, most of the students actually, I think, are on the autism spectrum. My little student doesn't have any behavior issues. She just has severe learning issues. Um, and this is our first year of like full inclusion with UDL. And our school is kind of, I think, trying it out because our district is moving towards everybody being in the regular ed classroom with support. And I think maybe eventually without support. I'm not really sure. And so I was asked to be this little girl's teacher, and she is the sweetest little thing ever. So I am happy to. And in the past, I've had other students who were in this program, and I have gotten used to having a revolving door in my classroom with all the paras in and out. And it's not, I don't have them just for her. I have another severe behavior issue kiddo who has them through special education.
How many years have you been doing this?
I think I figured it out because I can't even believe I'm this old, and it's been 24. Actually, my student teaching was in second grade, which is where I thought I wanted to be. And then did like a job share right after I got my teaching certificate for second. I did second part of the time, and then third part of the time with my cooperating teacher. Um, and then got my first job in fourth grade, thinking, like, what am I going to do with fourth graders? Because I didn't know, like 5 days before school started, but I was just happy to have a job at that time because at that time teachers were competing for jobs
Yeah.
big time. So I felt blessed that I was actually hired. It was hard to get into our district at that time. And then I did fourth grade for a really long time. Then I was asked to do a split, a 3-4 split. Ended up loving that. My favorite, I think, of anything I've ever done. And then would keep my third graders into fourth grade again. And so I did that 3 or 4 times. And then I went down just to straight third grade. And then the year that COVID hit, I decided I wanted to do something new, and there was a second grade opening. So I went to second grade, um, and liked that, but thought, I miss third grade. I miss them being able to write, and I miss teaching them, the multiplication. That was always so fun, and, the fun science we got to do. And then, but I needed a change from my building. My building had changed a lot, and it just wasn't a good fit for my personality. And I originally was offered a third grade position, which I accepted. And then the principal called me back and said, "Oops, that position went away, but I have a first grade position." And I was like, no way, am I doing first grade? So she talked me into it because she said I'd have a really great team, and that the next year I was promised I could go to third grade because there'd be a third grade opening. So I just
Yes.
basically had to do my time in first grade and then go to third grade.
This
And
is
then,
interesting because I know
yeah,
you're still teaching first grade.
well, because she was right. I did have a partner who was amazing, and wanted me to stay with her. And she's like, "I promise I'll help you." I mean, I went to first grade. I had just had knee surgery. It was like I literally was still on pain medication when I started. Um, it was COVID. So, I mean, we couldn't even be in the same room with each other, basically. And here I am trying to learn. And I'm teaching virtually first graders, the first time ever. And luckily, I had the greatest partner ever. And so much so that the next year, I was offered the third grade position, and which I declined because I wanted to stay in first grade. But there was only 2 first grades, and so my option was to take kindergarten or third grade. And I kind of negotiated and said, I'll do kindergarten, which I still can't believe I'm even saying this now. As long as I can keep my room, I wouldn't have to move. And I get to go back to first grade with my partner. And so that was the deal. And so then I went and taught kindergarten like a crazy person. But I learned so much and so much about teaching reading that honestly I never knew before, like the foundations of reading. And I also had a great partner in kindergarten who she and I actually started learning about the science of reading together. And so that has helped me just become a better teacher no matter where I think I'm going to, where I end up teaching. Knowing
Sure.
that is good. And then I got to keep my kindergartners and loop with them to first grade the next year. So,
There's some data out there right now saying that burnout is worse after the pandemic. My personal feeling is that I don't know if it's worse or if we're just acknowledging it, but I'm
mhm,
curious how you are seeing things in your own building as a first grade teacher, um, and kind of the transition over your career. You've been in a couple of different buildings in the last few years. What are your
mhm.
thoughts about burnout?
I agree with you that I think we're just acknowledging it more now. I think that it's always been there. Um, And it was just not okay to acknowledge it before because it's like you signed up to be a teacher. This is your job. You're doing it for the kids. Um, you just kind of have to make it work. And then when the pandemic, and I don't know how all districts were, but ours was actually pretty supportive of us during the pandemic. And we were able to do like two half day classes with really small classes when we did come back into the building. And it was like just like I think it was like 2.5 hours, if I'm remembering correctly, each session. And then we had Wednesday for planning. So it's kind of like, okay, this is how it should always be. You should always have a day that you get to sit here and plan and get everything ready. Because I think we realized how much we'd been doing on our own time before that, you know
Right.
and maybe we had realized it but just didn't understand how it was affecting us. And I think we were able to like have more of an actual life then too, because it was like we left when we were supposed to, because who wants to sit in your room all the time with your mask on? We
Right.
had our work done because we had it done either in because we had, I think, like a 2 hour planning period in between the sessions. So we either had it then or we had it done on Wednesday when we had our whole day. So it was, I think we got to see what life is like, or it should be like,
Yeah.
actually. Um, and then we went back to it and we were promised that it was never going to be like it was before. It's like they weren't going to keep piling all of this stuff on the teachers. And we go back the next year, we're still on masks and it's still getting piled. And it's
Yeah.
like, no, we are done. We came in here and literally risked our lives every single day,
Yep.
and we're believing you. And then the next year we go back and it's like, here's this new thing, here's this new initiative, here's this new thing. And we're like, you promised us.
Well,
Where is that?
another friend of mine and I were talking, and she said, every year we keep saying post pandemic, this is the year that things are going to get better.
Mhm.
And she said she just talked to some colleagues and they said this year's worse than ever. Are you
Mhm.
seeing that in your building?
Yes, and across the district, our district, yeah, its behavior has become like the biggest issue. And so my son's in kindergarten this year, and they're saying that the new kindergartners hopefully will be the start of seeing things go back to how they were, pre-pandemic with the kiddos, because they weren't as affected. Um, but even with the kindergarten right now, there's severe behavior issues that we're seeing. Um, yeah, in my classroom, I mean, it's been we had to evacuate several times. I don't know. We just keep hoping that things are going to get better, and we just don't see it. And I don't know what's happening in all the other buildings, but we do know that it's been across the district that behavior has been an issue, because they even have like a special task force that is supposed to be working on this. And we keep getting the surveys to say, have things changed. We just actually had one last week, and we're not really seeing that.
Walk me through what types of things cause a first grade classroom to be evacuated without using names or specific
Mhm.
scenarios. But I mean,
Mhm.
as you know, my last year teaching, I had to evacuate the classroom all the time.
Mhm.
But I
Mhm.
think in fifth grade, the things that I had to evacuate for probably look quite a bit different than what they look like in
Mhm.
first grade.
In first grade, and I've never in all of my 24 years of teaching have had to evacuate it until this year ever. I've had to have students removed from my classroom, but I've never gotten to the point where I've needed to evacuate. And I think I've evacuated 3 or 4 times. I can't even keep track. Um, it's like violence, like throwing things across the room, throwing scissors, throwing pencil boxes, throwing your desk and your chair, things that are going to hurt another student. At one time we were lining up to evacuate, and one particular student, this I only have one that we've had to evacuate for, took her pencil box, her plastic pencil box, and threw it across the room and almost hit my little student who's from the ILS classroom, who has not medically fragile, but has medical issues to where
Sure.
we have to be watching things really closely and carefully, and almost hit her in the head with that. And another student almost got hit with scissors as they were flying. So it's mostly destroying things or throwing things in the classroom.
Yeah. So mine was similar in fifth grade with the added bonus of sometimes I would have a student try to leave. So then I
Mhm.
have to be in two places at the same time, outside with the student who's trying to. But yeah, evacuating oftentimes was because I could not be in two places at the same time. I
Mhm.
could not leave my classroom full of students because I had students that couldn't be trusted to be left
Mhm.
alone with the other students.
Mhm.
And I had students that couldn't just leave without me keeping an eye on them because they might be,
Mhm.
who knows where they would go.
Mhm.
And when it's a
Right.
fifth grader, it's a pretty big kid usually.
Mhm.
When we talk about behavior, my experience around my situations where I've had behavior issues in my classroom is you kind of get a mixed bag of how families understand what is happening in the classroom. And I personally felt like I took a lot of heat for things that were completely out of my control. When I had a student who was taking his clothes off in the classroom, I did have parents who were then messaging me, sometimes beyond me, saying, "Why is this being allowed to happen?" I'm
Mhm.
wondering kind of how you're feeling in terms of how your families are responding to the classroom.
It it's odd. I don't know if it's different in the littler grades, because this I have a student, that the same student, who also removes clothing and in my classroom and in the hallway and other places. But no parents have ever reached out to me. The parents know, the kids who are having challenges. They'll definitely say, like a name or whatever. I don't know if the littles can communicate it like the bigger ones can, exactly what's happening,
Yeah.
and then they also forget by the end of the day too, but they remember, so and so, got, this happened with so and so, or that, this happened. Like even my son, who has a really challenging little kiddo in his class, even though she's very challenging, it's like they love them still. They're still their classmates.
Yeah. Do you feel that in your building and kind of the climate in education that there is a lot of parent support around what's going on in terms of behavior, in terms of learning, in terms of school policy? What are your thoughts on that?
95% of my parents are super supportive. It's the ones who um, don't want to acknowledge if their child has like a behavior issue, who question everything that we say and have so much mistrust for us, and suspicion about everything that we're saying and doing. That's really hard. And like, I mean, it's probably actually 98, 99%. I mean, like I really very rarely have any issues with parents. I love my parents. I think they love me. We work together. I try to develop that mindset in the very beginning that we are a team and we have to be a team, in order to make things work. And they're still the leader of this team, at
Yeah,
home.
absolutely.
And I'm just there to help and support and guide them. I'm more like the coach.
That's a beautiful way to phrase that. I don't know that everybody, I guess I will say you can have one family out of 25 that is that family that isn't supportive, that can take a lot of your time.
Mhm.
So I do want to acknowledge that the 2%
Mhm.
sometimes can take up 50% of your time um,
Yes.
by the things they do that are not supportive. So I do think that that sometimes leads to a lot of the burnout that we feel when we
Mhm.
have that one family that needs some support and needs
Mhm.
to maybe acknowledge that some things are going on, because a lot of times I feel like we get kiddos that may, especially in first grade, I would think that
Mhm.
maybe are showing some signs of having a learning disability, or showing
Mhm.
some signs of not being able to regulate themselves emotionally. And we also know that some supports put in the right places at the right time can really help those kids overcome those challenges, or at least get some tools in their toolkit to deal with those challenges.
Mhm.
However, it has been my experience, even in fifth, sixth, seventh grade, when I have tried to talk to some families about, have we thought about, looking into tutoring, or have we thought about, talking to your family doctor about these specific
Mhm.
behaviors, that sometimes I can really get hit with both barrels by a
Mhm.
family not wanting to acknowledge that.
Mhm. Yes, that is really what I'm seeing more of now than I have ever before, like not wanting to acknowledge it. This I don't want to change my child's personality, or I don't want to do this, or um, this doctor, said there's nothing wrong with this child, after they haven't had any information from us or what's happening in school. Or
Yeah.
and as a parent myself, I understand that, because you don't want to, that's hard. You don't want to think something is going on with my child, something is not right with my child. But also, as a parent myself, if my child's teacher came to me out of love and care, which is the only thing we ever have for these kids,
Yep.
to help them, I would want to make sure to help him, as right away, and do that as early. And that, as we know as teachers, early intervention is the most important thing that we can do, and to bring those supports in and help my child succeed. And honestly, when I am a teacher, those kids are mine for the year. I
Yep.
mean, they are my kids, and nothing that I ever do is against those kids. It's almost like, that these are my 20 other kids I have, and I want to help support them. So anything that we with as much effort and work that we put in with these kids each year, and I mean, they're still my kids even after they're gone. All
Yeah.
we want to help them. And then I think some parents feel that that's like a negative thing against them, like a judgment thing, and it's absolutely not. We just want to give these kids what they need to be successful, because that's why, the majority of teachers go into teaching, is to help these children, because that's where we get our joy from,
Yeah.
seeing these kids learn and grow.
I used to say at the beginning of the year meeting to my families, you get me as your extra family member this school year. So what night can I come over for dinner? Let's, fill
Mhm.
out the calendar here. Of course, nobody ever invited me to dinner, but I was ready and willing to go.
Mhm.
You mentioned too the trust issue. I, I do a lot of research just around teaching, education as a whole, for no other reason other than I'm just really interested in what we can do to make it better.
Mhm.
And it's really hard to pull out, which I'm sure people that are much smarter and have done this a lot longer and do it professionally would tell me it, but I'm still very interested in what comes up over and over. And there is this general sense that seems to be getting worse, where especially if we're looking at classrooms, let's say in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, And then 2000 and up, it's just really taken off, this distrust of teachers.
Mhm.
Not just a distrust of teachers, but a distrust of the education system as a whole, what we're teaching, how we're teaching it.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, I definitely have seen that. And I've seen a lot of that with some of my families of color. And which is hard for me because, as you know, my husband is from Guyana and is of color, and so is my son. And so I've had a lot of things when there's been mistrust of me. I would say I've had racism thrown at me quite a bit, that I'm racist, that this is why I'm doing this. And that's been really hard for me because I don't feel like I, have that in me. Um, but I don't know. I mean, other people, it's across the board, I do think, because maybe other people have had bad experiences with their education growing up, or, not the most positive experiences in school, and that is why they're reacting like this, or with other students that they've had. So I don't know that I have the answer to that, because I think I've been lucky that I haven't had a lot of people not trust me. But unfortunately, I feel like the families who haven't trusted me, or who've expressed that they didn't trust me, thought it was because I looked at their child in a different way because of the color of their skin. And that really bothered me.
Yeah, that's that institutionalized racism, this
Mm-hmm.
systemic thing that
Yeah.
when when it makes our people of color very wary
Mm-hmm.
and suspicious, and unfortunately usually they're right. So
Mm-hmm.
um but it is hard to, when someone feels that way about
Mm-hmm.
you, you kind of have to prove yourself, right? I mean, it's just time and building the trust
Mm-hmm.
when it's not there already, and that is a very big challenge.
And I would say, of all of those incidents that I've had, I was able to build the trust with most of the families eventually. It just took a lot of work. Hmm.
This does not surprise me that you were able to do that. What do you feel like you need to better deal with the behavior and lack of respect, if you feel that you have it? Is there a way to address this better than what we're doing as far as a school system?
I I feel like, especially, being a teacher for 24 years, I have pretty good classroom management, and we really work on how respect is very, very important, and it's mutual, between me and my kids. Um, but I just I would like just to be supported always, like if there is an incident where it's a high level of disrespect or defiance or behavior issue, that there is some sort of solution to that problem, and that it is made understood to that child that what they are doing is not acceptable, and it's just unexpected behavior, and it just cannot keep continuing, and that if it does continue, there needs to be some kind of a progression in how it's handled. And I'm all for like restorative justice, and I believe in that, 1,000,000%, and that's super important. But also, a person, an adult, a child, whatever, cannot keep doing the same thing over and over again, because I do tell them, like with our growth mindset, that it's okay to make mistakes in the classroom. It's okay to do these things, and we're learning from them. But once you know better, you need to do better, because if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, and you know that it's not right, then it's no longer a mistake, it's a choice.
Yeah.
And so when somebody, like when an adult makes a choice to do something wrong, especially, if it's a big deal, they go to jail. Kids need to learn that they can't keep making those choices over and over again, and there's no type of consequence for it, and that they just get to come back to the classroom and everything is just okay without anything else happening.
Yeah, this seems to be, we're kind of at a stalemate. There's only so much manipulating of behavior that we can do in the classroom to get kiddos to make the right choices without some backup.
Mm,
It has to be a community approach. And the
yes.
community doesn't seem to be able to agree on what the approach should be.
Hmm.
I don't have a solution for that. And I
Me
told
neither.
myself on this podcast, I was like, we cannot bring up stuff and not have solutions. But that is such a huge one. Maybe somebody will
Hmm.
listen and be like, ooh, my building is doing this well.
Hmm.
I need to be on the podcast and tell them how it's done. If you're out there, we would love to hear from you because, like I said,
Yes.
many teachers, many countries, many states, all having the same issues.
Hmm. And there's only so much we can do in our classroom. We're building the relationships. We have our own classroom systems in place, just to make sure that we are engaging the kids and making sure that they want to be there, and trying to limit any of those issues that we have. It's just when we have those issues, we want to feel supported, and I think that's what you're saying, is that we're just not right now feeling as supported as we would like to be.
Yeah, well, this, like I said, this was a problem when I was still teaching. Um,
Mhm.
when we have state mandated systems that say
Mhm.
every time a student is sent home from school, your building has to document that and send it into the state. And if you're doing it too much, there will be a penalty. There'll be a
Mhm.
penalty for your district. There'll be a penalty for your school. Um,
Mhm.
so basically, we get punished for
Mhm.
trying to have a system of consequences.
Mhm.
And it's kind of a mess.
Yeah,
But
like, currently we have a student who just gets followed around all day and doesn't even have to go to class or do anything, because we're not allowed to do anything about it or touch her in any kind of way or force her to do anything. And so she just wanders around, like teachers have to lock their doors so that she doesn't go in during lunchtime.
and I just don't like the precedent that that sets actually for the student that we're talking about,
Hmm.
because the brain, it is developing, and those neural pathways around our emotions and what's acceptable and not acceptable, those are all developing.
Hmm.
And when we say, and don't get me wrong, I'm not about putting hands on kids or anything
Hmm.
like that. But when we say, you know, we're just going to observe you and make sure that you're not going to hurt yourself, what that kiddo is hearing is, oh my gosh, I have no boundaries, except I can't hurt myself or somebody else. And
Hmm.
that is actually quite scary for children. They want
Hmm.
to know what the boundaries are because,
Yeah.
and that doesn't mean they're not going to test them, but we
Hmm.
know that boundaries make secure kids. Not super tight boundaries for anybody who's
Hmm.
out there listening, but knowing that there are rules and that everybody has to comply by them
Hmm.
actually creates a sense of safety. This is why we all feel safe getting in our cars going out on the highway, because we know that there's a set of rules that everybody has to comply by. Otherwise, I'd be terrified to drive. Actually, I'm terrified to drive here in Portugal, but that's another, podcast. So, um, but that brings me to another point too, which is all the other kids are seeing that there's this person with no boundaries. And I'm sure
Yep.
they're wondering why that is. And those kids
Mhm.
that are already on the line with, I don't really like the boundaries and I'm looking for a way out of them, are looking at that thinking, how do I get that gig? How do I get a person to
Mhm.
follow me around and I don't have to do any schoolwork, which is a lot of times what it boils down to when you work in the school system.
Mhm.
And I got to tell you, I'm going to go on a rant here, Shauna. I am an advocate for inclusion. I am an advocate for creating the best learning environment, but they are there to learn. That's the
Mhm.
whole reason these kids are coming to us, is to get these building blocks so that they can go on and do whatever it is they're going to do in life. And when we are a service where a kiddo gets dropped off and no learning occurs, the system has failed that kid. We are
Mhm.
failing. So what do you think would help with that?
That the parents could do.
Maybe the parents do or the school does, and they let the parents and kids know before they come into that first grade classroom that this is how things are done.
That these are the expected behaviors in our school, and that we do know that kids are going to make mistakes and they're going to be learning from those things, but that if expected behaviors are not being met continuously, that we will need support at home to make sure that we can change that behavior so that everyone has the right to learn in a safe and peaceful environment and is not worrying about what is going to happen from one or two kids during the day and be in kind of a trauma state because of things that are happening. Nobody should have to learn in that kind of environment. I just feel like it and I feel like the parents need to be held accountable for being our partner in that if things are happening at school, that it needs to be supported at home. In the public school system, it's really hard because you have to take everybody, and it doesn't matter how many times these things happen. I mean, I'm sure there's certain number, or that's legally okay to do before a student is not able to be in the classroom anymore. But we need to realize, parents and everyone in the education system, that one or two kids in every single classroom is disrupting their learning on a daily basis, sometimes every 5 minutes, is not okay and it's not acceptable. And there needs to be some boundaries to that, because teachers now are taking their kids to private schools. Public school teachers are taking their kids to private schools because they do not want their children in classrooms like we have. And that makes me super sad.
Yeah. Especially knowing what we do to set up those classrooms and try to make it a safe
Hmm.
place for everybody so that learning can occur.
Hmm.
Um, and that people don't want their kids in there. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's like the last thing we want.
Yes, I know.
We have this small portion of students who have some pretty significant behaviors that really alter the dynamics in the classroom. And oftentimes, those are the same students whose families aren't as supportive as maybe we would like for them to be, which then makes us need these administrative pieces to help us with that. But those are maybe not in place, maybe not followed, or maybe they are hindered by policies that are beyond all of our control. So, your first question for the road,
Mhm.
having said all of that, what is one thing you would change immediately in education if you could? It's a magic wand. Anything you want. Go.
All students need to have preschool.
Ooh, I like this.
Mandatory.
Mandatory preschool for all students.
Mhm.
And why is that your choice?
Because teaching kindergarten and first grade, I see the huge difference in kids who have had preschool education versus kids who have not had any type of learning, other than singing the ABCs or anything like that. Coming in knowing all your sounds versus only being able to sing the ABCs makes everything like such a huge difference. The playing field is not even for those kids who do not have preschool. They are coming in knowing, not even a fraction of what the other students know. And I see that difference in reading and math and even being able to write. Coming in not knowing how to write your letters, what any letter sound is. It makes it so much harder to catch up, because in kindergarten now they're doing stuff probably when you and I were in school, we were doing in first grade,
Yeah.
in the middle of first grade. So it is an uneven playing field for kids who don't have preschool.
Yeah. And we tend to forget how much learning actually occurs from birth, really, up to age 5.
Mhm.
And the more rich the environment is at younger ages, the more learning, the more neural pathways are being built. So that makes sense, having kiddos maybe in a preschool program, age 3 and age 4, it's really going to level those things out a lot because that brain is
And
ready.
socially. Yeah, socially as well. And I'm not saying it has to be like a formal in the classroom type of preschool program. They have they have forest preschools, whatever works for your child so that they are in some type of a learning environment where they can socialize with other people. It doesn't have to be that they have to, go into a classroom and be able to sit down and do these types of things. That's not preschool anyhow. But, I want them to be able to learn and grow in some sort of a social environment with some sort of a structure, then they'll also be, I think, more ready for the structures that we have in place when they come into school
Yeah.
in kindergarten.
Very interesting to think what that world would be like.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Number 2, second question for the road. And this one's going to go it's not as light of a question. So you can go wherever you want to with this. Because of the nature of what we do, we witness tragedy frequently. Tell me about one of the most tragic things that you have witnessed as an educator to your comfort level.
So I've been lucky um, in my teaching career, and I haven't experienced a lot of tragedy with students or um, colleagues until this year. And the night before we came back from winter break in January, my teaching partner and one of my closest friends passed away. And we were told, my other teaching partner and I, that we did not need to go into school the next day if we felt like we couldn't go. But we felt like, how could we do that to the kids? How can we have 3 substitutes in there when the middle classroom in our little pod lost their teacher? And so we decided to go. And honestly, I still don't know that I've had any time to truly grieve because you're just thrown back into it. And it is the trauma just comes from um, her not being there, just having to go back and jump into things exactly where you left them off, and then her reminders just always being there, and just not really even, it still doesn't even feel really real, I don't think, because I personally haven't, I don't know that I've processed it fully yet. It's like it still can't be real because I mean we had less than 12 hours to be ready to go in and teach again. And I do feel like that was probably for me the biggest trauma. I know other teachers who've lost students, who've lost students tragically, to suicide or accidental death or things like that too. So I count myself as lucky for not having to have that happen as well. But this was very, very hard. And to have to go into that room every day and next door to my friend's room and have her not be there, it's been hard. And seeing the kids and they're just really sad still. And I see that even though we have a wonderful replacement for her, I know she was sent to us and she's amazing. And I mean, for me too, not only for the kids is she like amazing, she's amazing for me because I knew her before and I love her and she's fabulous. And so I do feel blessed in that way. But it's just hard because it's kind of like you lose somebody who you love so much, but you just have to keep going on. But I guess that's life, unfortunately. That I mean, this is not something that's just something I've experienced. People experience this all the time. But I was sad that, I didn't even really have time to grieve or loss before I had to go jump back in and do my job.
You bring up some things that really, I think, will resonate with a lot of educators. And the first one that I'm hearing here is I don't think that people understand that we do become like a family. Sometimes it's a extremely dysfunctional family. I mean, but I have worked with, my teaching partners that we've been the best of friends, and I've worked with teaching partners that we did not get along, but most of them I'd take a bullet for. And you lost a family member.
I sure did.
And on top of that, you didn't get a chance to stop being teacher. So I think that is something else that a lot of educators who listen to this are going to resonate with, is that sometimes we don't get to feel what we feel because we can't. There's not a space for it. And I think a lot about there's many instances this happens. Sometimes we do lose family members. I have worked with teachers who actually took their bereavement months after their mother or sister or father passed away because it was testing, or there just wasn't time for them to grieve, so they didn't take their bereavement leave. I think that this is shitty. And I think that it is something that needs to change. When educators have to schedule their grief, it pisses me off. When educators have to schedule having our children because it's inconvenient for the public, I just think that's bullshit. So, putting my 2 cents in there, Shauna.
Well, no, when my mom passed away, I remember because I wasn't allowed to start my bereavement leave until she passed away, but she was in intensive care, and we were going to be taking her off life support. And I remember that the time when she finally started failing after life support, I was still at work. And so I missed her passing away because I couldn't get to Tacoma in time when they called me to tell me to come.
I'm not going to go on a rant, but I think that part of when we talk about teacher burnout, we talk about what's wrong with the system. This is a foundational thing. For anybody that's listening, this is a foundational thing. We're human beings. We deserve to go through the same things in life as everybody else does. Being responsible for educating the youth of America does not mean that we don't have these basic human needs. We're not robots. Honestly, Shauna, I strongly believe we got to save our teachers at this point. I'm not teaching, and I mean, my life is drastically different. I'm healthier. I'm calmer. My life is mine again, but I can't stop thinking about my colleagues that don't have what I have right now. And not that you have to come to Portugal to get this, but wow. I mean, I just feel like there's a big need for teachers to have a voice right now, and to make it to whatever their retirement dreams are, you know.
Well, this podcast is totally out of my comfort zone, not something that I normally would do, but I'm doing it for the reasons that you're talking about. Because no, I understand no one's going to see me or anything, or probably even know who I am. But I'm very quiet about everything. But I think that we have to start standing up.
It's important that people know you, Shauna. It's not important what school you work at, what district you're in, what state you're
Yeah.
in, because this is everywhere. Teachers all over the world are feeling this pressure, and our health is suffering because of it. Going to take us in a lighter direction now before I get myself all ranted up here. Number 3, third question for the road. To balance out the trauma. Kids are funny. They are hilarious. So, what is one of the funniest things you've experienced during your time as an educator that you can tell us about? because sometimes they do inappropriate things that we're like, this is hilarious, but I can never tell anyone. So,
Yes, they are. They are. I hear funny things all the time. The kids are truly hilarious. I was thinking about this, and I think one of the funniest things was I had, like I said, I've been blessed to have wonderful students and wonderful kid and parents. It was April Fool's, and I was teaching fourth grade, and there's a student like highly motivated by like aeronautics and coding and science, and I love this kid, and he's now he is probably going to be some kind of aeronautic engineer. He's like at that point in his life, and I get to be in contact with him. I just love it so much. um but his mom was, and I had him 2 years, third and fourth grade. So when you have the kids for 2 years, you like your family with their family too. It's just
yeah.
that's I love looping. And so I could not get my computer to work. I'm sitting there and I'm trying to get my computer work. I'm trying to get it to work. And this was, we only had like we didn't have our laptops or anything at that time. Trying to take attendance. I can't do anything. And so I'm like, hey, you, because this is my kid who knows everything and who could just do it. And I'm like, will you come over here and fix my computer? He's like, nothing's working. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know. You're going to have to call somebody. And so I'm like on the phone, and he is cracking up, and he goes, pick up your mouse. And I picked up my mouse, and he had put like one of those Mako dots on the bottom of the light that makes the mouse work. And he goes, April Fool. Just like, you are the best. Because I mean, I had been trying to do that for like 20 minutes to take attendance. You know how they're going to call us, if we don't do
Yes.
attendance. And so, and then he was just laughing, and all the kids were laughing because they were all in on it. I don't know how they kept straight faces, because I must have like gone out. I think somebody had called me out to the pod or something, and I had to do something. And then his mom texted me a couple of minutes later, and she's like, how did the joke work? I'm like, really well, because I had no idea.
Could have worked even better if he'd actually made you put in a ticket through tech and all of that.
Yeah, he was ready to start like busting up. So I think he didn't have that much more in him, but he like thought that was the best thing ever. Yeah. So that was probably, I mean, they tell me funny stories all the time, but that was the funniest thing that happened because he got me really good.
I love it. I love it when
Mhm.
kids feel that level of comfort that they can
Mhm.
actually joke around with their teachers.
Yes, me too.
Shauna, this has been amazing. I'm going to have a final question for you. But before I ask you the final question, is there anything else that you want to talk about? Because this is your time.
Mm. I just I want to say that even though so many things are hard in our job right now, because they are, and I mean, we are burnt out for real. Like, I mean, all of us, as you know, which is why you're doing this. Um, there still are so many little pots of joy each day and the things that we get to do with these kids and like their growth. Um, and the amazing parents that we do get to work with, and the amazing colleagues and friends that we get to know, that it's like those kind of things keep me hanging on. Sometimes it's by a thread, but they keep me hanging on. And I just want your listeners to know that there are so many things that need to be changed. But there are so many wonderful people out there. And actually, those are the people that we need to change this for. And your teachers are some of them,
That's right.
And so while things can definitely be changed in our system, I'm grateful that I get to know people like you and the people that I get to work with, and the wonderful families that I get to work with, that can sometimes make up for all the hard things and all the junk that we have to go through on a daily basis with other things. So I, even though I just I don't want to sound super negative,
Sure.
because there are so many wonderful things out there, and I want, I want things to change. But people like you and some of my families, I want to keep things like that.
Well, I want you to know that you don't sound negative at all. You
Oh,
sound realistic. And I think this is part of the conversation for all of us, is being real about these things that are going on. Um, I've been very honest. I was negative at the end. Like I was that teacher that needed to leave. And I'm really glad that I did that. Not, I needed to do it for my family and myself, but I also needed to do it for my students because they need to know. I always said it was never the kids
Mm-hmm.
that got me. Really, I love the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to know that. They need to know they're loved and that they
Mm-hmm.
are our joy. And I feel like you do a pretty good job of letting them know that. So,
I hope so.
all right. Last question.
Okay.
You go into the staff room, the sink is full of dishes. Whose responsibility is it to do those dishes?
The people who use the dishes.
What if they don't do it?
I have a hard time with this one because I do not feel like it's my responsibility to do other people's dishes. I feel like they need to do their dishes. And if I were to use dishes in the staff room, I would do my own dishes. And I barely have time to pee during the day. So I don't know when I'm going to find time to do somebody else's dishes. So I don't use dishes from the staff room. I very rarely even go into the staff room. And I'm probably going to be looked at poorly for this, but I do not sign up to clean the staff room because I don't think that's my job because I have 4 million other jobs to do. And I think that we are all adults and we should clean up after ourselves.
And you have a family to go home to, and you're going to
Mhm.
have to do their dishes. So,
Exactly. Yes.
Shana, thank you again so much for coming on the podcast.
I wish I knew.
Educators at all levels know that sometimes students need more than what any one educator can give them. As the proverb states, it takes a village. In the Loop Education can be part of that village. With more than 20 years of educational expertise in public and private school systems, spanning multiple countries and 3 continents, Isabel De La Tour, founder and operator of In the Loop Education, can be a vital part of a student's learning community. She offers services as mentor, tutor, and liaison for international students and families navigating the education systems in the UK, US, and a portion of Europe. As Isabel states, understanding the curriculum, associated qualifications, and progression paths to further education is not always straightforward. Isabel and In the Loop Education are here to help students find that straightforward pathway. You can find In the Loop Education on Facebook and on Instagram at In the Loop EDU. See today's show notes for links to
I
both.
wish I knew.
Hey there. Before I sign off, I want to say, if you liked today's episode, and since you're still with me, I'll assume you did, be sure to check out my 3-part series featuring Kelly on special education teacher burnout. Today's episode was produced and edited by me. The theme music is by Otis McDonald featuring Joni Inez. If you know someone who might enjoy these conversations, please share the podcast episodes as much and as often as you can. It's as simple as copying the link you use to access today's episode and sending it in a message or sharing it on social media. I'm a small, independent operation, and your shares broaden our audience. Perhaps you or someone you know will be inspired to talk about teacher burnout. If you would like to get your voice on my podcast, contact me via the link on my webpage, taught.buzzsprout.com. Coach, speaker, and author Rashid Ogunlaro said, "It may take many voices for people to hear the same message." Join me in being one of the many voices rising up to get the message out around educator burnout. This is Melissa Lepore. Thank you for listening to Taught, the podcast.
I wish I knew.